Welcome to Moving Conversations, a podcast for movement professionals by movement professionals. If you coach, train, or teach movement, Pilates, or fitness, then this podcast is for you. With more than 60 years of experience in fitness and Pilates, your hosts, Brian Ritchie and Nora St. John, explore the science of human movement, diving deep into the facts, myths, and common misconceptions, hoping to spark thought and conversation about how we view fitness and movement. Now, let's jump into Moving Conversations. And welcome back to Moving Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. Good morning, Nora. How are you doing?
Fall is in the air. The weather now in Sacramento is cooler in the morning and still warm in the afternoon, but it's been really, really beautiful. And the leaves are just starting to change. And
nice.
We're really just enjoying a nice transition into fall.
Very
How about
nice.
you?
It's been a little chilly. It's getting chillier here. I just got back from a trip out to Arizona where it was a lot warmer. I got to tell you,
A lot warmer.
Being on an airplane with, my hoodie on because they're so cold, and landing. And as we're, the pilot comes on and says, and the temperature here in Phoenix is 95 degrees. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, take this off now. And it was schwitzing like crazy already. I was like, oh my gosh. So yeah, it was definitely a little warm there, but things are changing and we're going to get some color in our leaves pretty soon. So that'll be nice.
Excellent.
And today we have a very special guest, and I'll let you get to the introduction in just a second. But before we do that, hit that like and subscribe button. We really appreciate it. Every time you share it, every time you like it, and a comment would be really appreciated. It helps our algorithms, helps us promote this to more people. So we really appreciate it. That would be great. Moving Combos is our Instagram handle, and that's the way you can check us out or DM us there, or movingcombos@gmail.com. Best way to get in touch with us. So without further ado, we have a very special guest, and I'll let Nora take it away.
So we love having guests because Brian and I like talking and like chatting with each other, but we've talked a lot to each other. So we like to bring in other people of different perspectives.
She's sick of me.
I am not. I can always learn something from Brian. But basically, joining us today is Helen Vanderburg. And if any of you don't know Helen Vanderburg, I'll be a little bit surprised because Helen is just an amazing international presenter. She owns a fabulous club up in Calgary. She is a synchronized swimmer, world-class synchronized swimmer. And she has literally done every possible method of fitness, from Pilates to yoga. She's a spin instructor. She's taught group exercise. She's taught HIIT things. She's taught animal flow. Like you name it, Helen has done it. And because of that, we wanted to bring her in today to talk about breathing and just give a kind of a general overview. Breathing's a big topic, but it's really different in Pilates and in yoga and in group X and in spin. So we thought we'd kind of bring that topic in and bring Helen on for that. So welcome, Helen.
Hello, I am honored to be on your podcast and to talk about this conversation because I think the conversation of breathing has become huge, not just in fitness, but in health, wellness, mental health.
Yes.
It's a big conversation.
And it's something that we
Absolutely.
never focused on for so long in the general fitness realm. I know in Pilates, it's a lot more focused on, but in the general fitness realm, it was, breathe on exertion, breathe out on exertion, breathe in, during the eccentric. And there's so much more to it than just that. And now it's wonderful that there's actually the topic is out there. So I'm thrilled to be discussing this with you today.
Yeah, you're right on, Brian, is that, in fitness, we would coach breathing in the weight room probably more than anywhere else. Everywhere else, we just assumed people would breathe heavier when they start working harder. And hopefully they were breathing well. We just never really spent any time on understanding breathing or how to help our clients breathe better.
I actually had a physical therapist friend when I mentioned breathing. She said, look, one thing's going to happen, they're going to breathe. So I don't care if they breathe in when they breathe in, when they breathe out, when they breathe out, they're going to breathe. And if they don't, they pass out and then they're going to breathe on their own. So don't worry about it. So, okay. That's one option.
Like, okay.
All right.
That's one way of looking at breathing, but there are so many different techniques for breathing. And the more you explore the world of breathing methodologies, the more you realize there's a lot to learn.
Right. And one of the things that I wanted to bring up, and I know you're going to bring it up when you start talking about the different methods, is I always think of breathing as being the link between the mind and the body.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So yes, we breathe unconsciously most of the time, thank God. Because if we had to wake up, 12 times a minute during our sleep to remind ourselves to breathe, that would be bad.
Yeah.
But breathing can also be done very consciously. So it's this funny way in which it works automatically, which is great.
Yeah.
But we also could really use it consciously to change our mental state, to change our physical state, to enhance what we're doing, to make what we're doing harder, easier. So that's what I love about breathing is it's a nice, easy pathway into that mind-body connection.
Yeah, and methodologies like yoga, martial arts, Pilates have always had breathing at the root of what
Yes.
they did, and I think we can learn from all of those disciplines, especially the ancient disciplines in martial arts and yoga, how breathing was used to affect people's physiology. And I
Yeah.
think that's what's now coming forefront for us is that how our physiology actually changes when we change our breathing patterns.
Awesome. All right, Helen. So how does that happen? So tell
Okay,
us a
so
little
how
bit
does that
about
happen?
that. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting is, and a lot of the research is indicating that our breath is the closest link to our autonomic nervous system.
Right.
So when and let's just go back to the autonomic nervous system, right? So the autonomic nervous system is, controlling all of the systems of the body. So we have our parasympathetic system, which calms everything, the blood pressure, the heart rate, the breathing rate, everything is regulated. So we have a thermostat where our body wants to stay at what we call homeostasis. And so parasympathetic response in our nervous system is keeping things calm. The sympathetic is to bring everything up, right? So that when we are doing exercise and movement and activities of life, it's like we need to bring our heart rate up, our breathing rate up. We got to change our hormone balance in our body. All of these systems have to change. And so sympathetic response is typically when we're doing exercise, right? We get sympathetic response.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And then after the exercise, the parasympathetic response has to come in to bring us back to what we call homeostasis. So this constant movement of parasympathetic, sympathetic response in our body is going on whether we realize it or not. And that can be regulated through breath, which is super interesting. So and people maybe even do this and they don't even realize they do it. I'm going to use an example from my athletic days is before I would go out for a big competition, like I was in the waiting room for my turn to compete, I would start yawning. And I would think to myself, this is not a good thing to be yawning before you have to be at your peak performance, right? It seems like oppositional. And at the time, I didn't understand it. But now, if I look back, it's like when you yawn, what do?
Breathe.
You're taking in oxygen.
You're taking in
A lot of
oxygen.
mouth.
You're needing oxygen. So my body was saying, Helen, you are in stress. You need more oxygen into your body to calm your nervous system, to balance it out again so that you're ready to perform at your peak.
Awesome.
So our bodies naturally will want to take care of ourselves, but we can actually learn consciously, as you said, Nora, to manipulate. So if we're too excited, we can calm down. If we're not excited enough, we can bring it up, right? So how do we manipulate our energy systems and our nervous systems and all of the physiology of our body simply by using our breath? And I think that's where it gets super interesting.
I love that. That was so clear. Like I love
Yep.
just that. That's exactly what we're talking about here, right? It's like, what are we trying to do with our nervous system, which also includes our mental state, our feeling of readiness or lack of readiness, all of that. So, and also that connection back to ancient practices of breath. I've also studied a ton of martial arts and yoga and meditation, and all of them have breath as a fundamental component of how we regulate the nervous system, not just to bring about physical states and physiological states, but mental states as well. So
Yeah.
really nice. Love it.
Yeah, and it's super interesting. So when I started studying breath in a more deeper way, which probably started with my yoga journey, right?
Yeah.
So studying in yoga, and some of you may be familiar with some of the yoga breath, but in Ashtanga yoga, Ujjayi breathing is at the foundation of yoga, that yoga practice. And that's to give you energy when you are moving through a yoga flow practice. Of course, it ends also with lion's breath, which is a completely different kind of breath that you would do at the end of the practice, and that's to calm the nervous system. And when I first started studying that, I just took it verbatim. It's like ujjayi
Okay, I'll
breath,
do that.
lion breath, this breath, right? Not really thinking more deeply as to where it fits in. And then, of course, I started studying Pilates, and Pilates using, deep diaphragmatic breathing, percussive breath, different kinds of breathing techniques to activate, right? To find activation through the body as you're going. And then studying meditation, I've got a meditation teacher here that I work with, and learning to calm and decrease stress and anxiety, and what kind of breath was used there. And so then I started thinking, I was like, okay, well, there's these breaths and this breath and that breath. And so my brain always likes to categorize things. And so I found the simplest way for me to start looking at all the different breathing techniques that are out there is to group them into 3 categories. One, is it an activation breath? Are we using the breath to excite ourselves, to prepare
Yep.
ourselves, to ready ourselves, to maybe activate some of the muscles that we need to have involved in the movements
Yep.
that we're going to be
Yep.
doing? The
Great.
second one I think of as balancing breath. Do I need to keep myself pretty well balanced throughout whatever I'm going to be doing in this activity? So it's like, I don't want to get too excited, too calm. I'm kind of going to rhythmical. I think of the long distance runner, right? Got to keep it
Yeah.
balanced over a long
Moderation.
period of time, right? I want to
Yeah.
not get my breath too high, not get it too low. I just got to keep moderating it, finding this balanced breath. And then restorative breath. And so that's kind of what I would think is a third category, is that what is this restorative breath that helps me calm down, helps me bring down my energy system, that helps me restore my body. And so when I'm looking at different breath techniques, I keep looking at it going, okay, does it fit into activation? Does it fit
Uh-huh.
into balancing? Or does it fit into restoration? And what I found to date, as I'm studying more breaths, is they all kind of fit into one of those buckets.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
That's actually
Nice.
that
Nice.
again, really good categories for us to think about, and a
Yeah.
nice way to put all of the many, many, many ways to breathe. Because like you, I've learned a billion different versions. Those 3
Yeah.
categories help to make it clearer which one I'm going to choose for what purpose, and how things work with different activities or different mental states or different physical states.
Yeah, because each of them has a different physiological response. And if we understand what they do, what the breathing technique does for you, and then we can start to apply it to what we need it for. And I think that transfers into working with our clients. What do our clients need? Sometimes a client walks in and they're super stressed out, like they've had a day, right? It's like
Mhm.
their anxiety levels high. Before they start working out, maybe we need to bring them down, right? Calm them down a little bit before they start. Or maybe they come in and they're really like sleepy and feeling
Blah.
lazy and lethargic, and they just don't want to move. How can we then get them a little bit excited using their breath, kind of changing that physiology, to bring them to that state? And I think the more that we can understand that with just some simple techniques, we can start to apply that into working with our clients.
Awesome. So, with that in mind, then, could you give us some examples of an activating breath? Like when you would use it, what kind of the different versions are, what modalities like you prefer it with, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so activation breath, the easiest example would be a deep diaphragmatic breath, right? So we're actually intentionally moving the diaphragm and all of the muscles that are involved in breathing. We're trying to bring as much inhalation in, so pressing the diaphragm down and then affecting all of the muscles of breath. And then on the exhalation, being intentional with moving the air out. As we move out, maybe intentionally thinking about lifting the pelvic floor, drawing the transversus abdominis in, feeling like we're lifting the diaphragm. I often think of it like the Heimlich maneuver, where it's that J, that in and
Yeah.
up, right? That in and up of the diaphragm, but making it intentional. So you're consciously being aware of the contraction and the relaxation of the diaphragm, but you're also consciously aware of where you're filling the body with breath. And so
Mm.
with deep diaphragmatic breathing, I like to think of it as feeling the container of the whole torso, right? So filling the container from the top, breathing into the top rib cage, then into the mid ribs, the bottom ribs, into the belly, and then moving the air out on the exhalation by drawing the belly inwards and upwards to the diaphragm, feeling the rib cage and drawing in, and then letting the ribs drop down, that last puff of breath coming out. So actively using our inhalation and exhalation and using the muscles of breath to create that breath. That
So what,
creates
like,
activation.
so what kind of like, can you name an exercise where you might do that, or a moment in class where you might really focus on that? Or even just a client, showing up at your door and you're like, okay, let's do a little bit of this.
Let's do,
Like, when might you use that? What's an application for that?
yeah, a great time for doing deep diaphragmatic breathing is when we're looking at something that we need activation of core stabilization. And that could be a squat. That could be on the floor doing a core exercise, and something where we're feeling like we need to connect to the center of our body, find that stabilization in the center of our body before we perform the movement. So I would say if I was going to do a loaded squat with somebody, I would get them to do that breath. Do a couple of those
Nice.
breaths, set that stability through the body, then load, then squat, right?
Great.
Yeah.
It's interesting
Yeah.
that you do it sort of at the beginning as almost preparatory, rather than just cueing it. Because normally in a lot of the stuff that I've done for core stability, spinal stability work, it sort of becomes automatic in the way I'm teaching it. But I don't think I've ever had them focus on the breath before the activity. So that's very different from what I've done before. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and what I like doing that, Brian, is because sometimes when they're moving, they're thinking about all the other parts, right? They're
Yeah.
thinking about my
Yeah.
legs, the weight, the alignment cues that we give them, and so their brain is so busy that we all cue, like, and you're such a great cuer in what you do. We cue the breath, but does it get lost for
Yeah.
them, right?
Right. Because they've got,
And it might.
And it
yeah.
might, because we're just thinking about, and I know for myself, like I experience that sometimes. It's like I shut down because I'm like, I can't think of anything else. I got to think about these steps of the exercise, or where my spine is, or where my legs or my arms are. It's like I've forgotten about the breath.
And
Right.
sometimes you don't necessarily want to continue to cue the breath because, like you said, it gets them overwhelmed. If you give
Yeah.
them too many cues, their brain gets overloaded and you see them sort of get that panicky look because there's too much going on. So at least I find that the breath that's not always going to be my first thing to cue. Then I'm going to back off on that and continue with the other alignment issues to keep them safe.
Yeah.
But to prep it beforehand to sort of prime the pump makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So I like doing that, like playing that with the breath, and bringing that awareness to them, because a lot of our clients have no idea, number one, how they're breathing. Number
Yes.
two, how the breath can affect the movement, or
Yeah.
their energy, or their state of mind. All of those things get affected with breath. And staying on activation breaths, I was thinking about this a little bit more. So if I go to the yoga world, Ujjayi breath is an activation breath, right? So Ujjayi breath is in through the nose and then out through the nose, but closing the back of the throat, right? So you would breathe in fully, and then as the air moves out, you close the throat, and it makes a sound with your breath as it's coming out through the nose. And that type of breath, what it does is it restricts the movement of breath on the exhalation. And by restricting the movement of breath on the exhalation, now I've got to work the muscles of breath to move the breath out. So in that breath technique, we stimulate the transverse abdominis, the intercostal muscles, all of the muscles of breath to get more active to move the air out in a
Nice.
Ujjayi breath. Yeah.
So I've done Ujjayi breath in my yoga classes for like, many years now, and never have I had such a clear explanation of it. So that was really helpful to me, because I used it forever and I like it. And I appreciate that feeling of like constricting the exhale, which does give you a different feeling. It also brings your awareness to it, because you're kind of hearing, how am I exhaling? And usually it lengthens the exhale a bit too. Yeah. So yeah, excellent. So Ujjayi breath. Now, how would you, so this is a question for me, because I don't do as much cardio as either of you guys do. If I'm, let's say, cueing breath in something like a spin class or for cardio of some kind, or if I'm training a runner, I'm training somebody who does like, high level cycling or something. What do I do? Like, how do you work with the breath in that circumstance?
Yeah. So I think this is interesting. So this is where the balancing breath comes in. So balancing breath, and it's often called covert breathing, is equal time on your inhalation and your exhalation.
Ah,
So equal, if I take a 4 count breath in and a 4 count breath out, right? So if you just even you practice that and think about 4 counts in and 4 counts out, and then 4 counts back in and 4 counts out. Just by observing that, you might notice, well, because we're all just sitting and we're in a relaxed state, that that's actually not easy. You might want to have a longer exhalation because we're in a relaxed state right now. Did you sense that?
yeah.
Yeah, like
Mhm.
I inhale 4, I would want to go for exhale for 8 or more, right? Because I'm in a relaxed state. But once you elevate your heart rate up
Right.
and your breathing and your heart rate match each other, like with ventilation rate and heart rates when we're working tend to go up at the same rate, is that now if I want to manage it in that endurance training zone, if I can equalize my inhalation to exhalation, I keep a balance, right? I need to get enough oxygen in, but enough carbon dioxide out to keep me going as I'm doing this work. And sometimes we have people put a nose clip on, right? So they wear a nose clip and have to only breathe through their mouth, or reverse, we tape their mouth and only breathe through the nose, so that we start to learn how to regulate and get that equalness of breath. Of course, I was a synchronized swimmer, so I always wore a nose clip. So I'm a mouth breather. For me to go to nose breathing is challenging. I have to really think
Hmm.
I'll bet. I'll
about the
bet.
breath.
It's like,
Right? And so you can apply this even simply like when you go for a walk. So if you go
Mhm.
for a walk and you start to notice your breath, notice your rhythm of your inhalation to your
Mhm.
exhalation. And then if you can manipulate it to go even, you might find you have more energy. It becomes easier to do that. Now, depending on the intensity of the work, if I'm walking, I could maybe do a 4 count in, 4 count out. If I'm doing a spin class and we're going, at high endurance, I maybe am doing 2 count in, 2 count out, 2 count in, 2 count out. Right? So
Yeah.
the rate will change, but we want to try and keep it even with the inhalation and exhalation.
That's really
So,
interesting because I've experienced very similar military running.
Yeah.
They want you to match your pace, your cadence. So we would do a 3 in, 3 out, or 4 in, 4 out, depending on the pace that you're running. So, and I never realized the reason why, and it was probably stumbled upon years ago, but that's a very interesting way to do it because it's true. You felt more energetic and it kept your breathing rhythmic enough that, believe it or not, you really didn't run out of breath. It forced you to breathe. You couldn't hold your breath. You couldn't, constrict. You had to breathe deeply, but in that rhythmic pace. So that's very interesting to sort of hear, you know, concepts behind it rather than here, just do this.
Yeah, just that, and that's interesting because I'd never heard that before, Brian. But that would totally make sense. That because what people do when they exercise and they have to go hard for a long period of time, you hear them say this all the time. They get short of breath, right? Because
Mhm.
they're
yeah.
breathing too rapidly, right? They're
And
breathing
yeah.
too rapidly. Yeah. So
And
finding a
yeah,
rhythm.
sorry.
That's
Yeah,
okay. Go.
and I would just say that when I think about people who are just starting to do that, after a lot of people, there's team and training, which is they do marathons, they do that kind of thing, and a lot of my clients are like, oh, I'm going to do a team and training. I'm starting to become a runner as an
Mhm.
adult, as somebody who's never really run before, for example, and I'm thinking about working with them, and they were like they had such a hard time getting out of breath, and a lot of it was because they didn't know how to regulate their breathing with their activity. So kind of like they start panting early on,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and then they run out of breath and they'd run out of energy, and they're like, oh, crash really quick. So I think that's just a really nice way for them to just start to see, like, okay, just choose a pace where you could really keep the breath and the body in coordination, because that also gives you that like longevity, right? It really increases
Yeah.
the endurance, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the better you become at breathing, of course, and the better oxygen exchange you get for cardiovascular activities. And cardiovascular activity is all about O2 utilization, right? The more oxygen you can get to the working muscles to break down the energy, to keep you going, the more efficient you are. And so if people aren't breathing well, they're not efficient. And so they're going to fatigue so much faster than somebody who can breathe well, get good oxygen exchange, and, continue the movement or the work.
And for years, we talk about increasing your VO2 max and
Yeah.
trying to do that. And people who are much more experienced naturally seem to have a higher VO2 max because they have a better oxygen exchange rate. They're better cardiovascularly fit, but they also know how to breathe, and their body has figured it out for them. Back at university, we had a number of people in my class who were triathletes, and their VO2 max was sort of off the charts. But you watch them and they looked very comfortable doing all of the tasks, where the uninitiated were getting out of breath. They were panting faster. You could see that they were very uncomfortable. And you're right, didn't know how to breathe. And these were college students. So it's not as though they were, aged athletes. These were younger people, but just inexperienced with a lot of cardiovascular fitness. So it's interesting to sort of think about that.
Yeah, and it is interesting. And I think it's interesting. And I do think it's really a newer development in coaching too with athletes, is that before we coached the distance or the time and techniques and those kind of things, but never really talked about the breathing. We just assumed it came with it, right? But now more coaches are looking at how are they breathing as they're doing the movement or the activity of choice, and it really can affect performance. One of the breathing techniques that I think falls into this category really well, if people just want to start practicing controlling their breath and learning the breath, is not only doing the covert breath, which is equal inhalation to exhalation, but a box breath. And a box breath is to inhale for 4 counts, or any counts that you decide, but let's use 4. 4 counts in, then hold your breath for 4, and then exhale for 4, and then on the exhalation, hold for 4. And in the research for that breath, it's that it does better oxygen exchange. So that when I take the inhalation in and I hold my breath, I've got time for oxygen exchange. And then I exhale, I get rid of the carbon dioxide, giving me space to bring in fresh inhalation and oxygen on the next breath. So it's a 4 counts, a box. 4 counts in, hold for 4 counts, 4 counts out, hold for 4 counts at the bottom.
Now, do you ever experience people getting anxious on something like that? Because some people, when you hold your breath, that can get to be a little anxiety inducing, especially at the end, not when it's in, but upon exhalation, you tell someone, release all your breath, but don't breathe. Stop breathing. Wait. That can be, that can be, just, I can feel the adrenaline going, oh my gosh, when am I, obviously my body will figure out, take a breath, dummy. But when you're being coached that way, I'm just wondering, do you have people who have that sort of anxious moment?
Absolutely. People do not want to stop breathing. Right? The human body is built for survival, right? We need to breathe to survive. And so if people have never done activities where their breath did get out of control, or they had to push so hard that they felt like they couldn't breathe, or like me, a synchronized swimmer where you had to hold your breath for a long period of time, they're not used to the feeling. And so you're absolutely right, Brian. Anxiety will set in. It's like, wait a minute, I need air. And so I always say to people, let's start easy then, right? We can inhale for 4, hold for 2. Yes, or hold for 1, and then exhale. So starting to get that awareness or consciousness of I can hold my breath and I still will survive, and not bring in that anxiety response. When you're talking about it, makes me think about the Wim Hof breath. Have you practiced that one before?
Yeah.
That one causes me anxiety.
Yeah, it's like, how long can I hold my breath? Not that long.
I know. And you think that you're a good breather, and there's like, wait a minute, I've only been holding my breath for 10 seconds.
And I'm
Explain
dying.
explain what that is. That I'm unfamiliar with that one. With
Okay,
that
so
breath.
Wim Hof,
Yeah.
and Wim Hof is a person. He has this breathing technique, and it's 30 cycles of a full inhalation and exhalation. So you fully inhale, fully exhale. Like think the diaphragmatic breathing. So deep, full breaths, um, 30 of them. And then I wrote this down so that I would remember exactly. Then the last one, you exhale fully and you hold your breath after you exhale. So not hold your breath on the inhale. You exhale fully and you hold it, and then you're supposed to time how long before you need to do an inhalation. So
2
the first
seconds.
time I did this, truly, I think I made it 10 seconds, and I can hold my breath,
Wow.
but I can hold my breath on an inhale, not an
Right.
exhale. And so my
Right.
Wow.
brain was like, oh no, oh no, 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 you do not
breathe,
breathe.
breathe.
Not breathe.
Oxygen. Check, please. Oxygen.
I need oxygen. But and then the idea is then you take an inhale when you need it, right? And then you'd repeat the whole thing again. So interestingly enough, a lot of athletes are using this technique to
Mhm.
learn
Yeah.
how to manage their breath, not feel lightheaded. Because the first time you do this, that 30 repetitions of your inhalation, exhalation, you're like, you feel lightheaded. You're like,
Mhm.
your body's tingling, something doesn't feel right. And then that holding on your exhalation is challenging. You want to inhale, like you really do desperately want to inhale. But when you start to learn to do it, it's, I can't even describe it. It's just you feel like you have a lot of oxygen in your brain, in your body,
Hmm.
after doing it.
It's
I'm gonna have to play
positively
with that.
stimulating. Yeah,
It
Really?
is
Okay.
stimulating. That's a great way. That's
It's
why I think of
very,
it as activation breath.
yeah, and not even necessarily performance stimulating. It's like boom. It's like there's a clarity, like your mind feels sharp. It's like a good jolt of caffeine to be chemical
Wow.
about it. Or at that moment, if you're caffeine sensitive like I am, to like, ooh, I feel alert. I feel alive. I feel like I can manage anything.
Yeah, it's
Um,
very interesting. And Wim Hof has like a YouTube video. He'll take you through it.
yeah.
And so you can Google it and follow him along, and he explains the whole breath technique, and you can do it with him, and it's interesting.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to play with that. I like that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that I wanted to just bring up here is partly it's just because of COVID and the various things we've been through. I feel like a lot of people have breathing issues now that they may not have had before.
Yeah.
I know POTS, positional orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, and various breathing issues seem to be more intense for people. A lot of people have asthma that they didn't have asthma before. So I really find that breathing for my clients who've had kind of lung issues, just to get more, more pathological about it, has been so incredibly helpful. Also, like to Brian's point, to manage anxiety. Like there's a lot of my clients who have high levels of anxiety, and trying to use breath in that conscious way to really manage that is, I mean, this is what a lot of meditation is, right? It's like taking
Yeah.
your nervous system and moderating it down to a level where you can be calm and just clear and collected and just let your anxiety ease out. So I think this is also getting to the last probably category of breathing, which
Yeah.
is this restorative breathing, right? How do you kind of like use breath to bring the nervous system back down into balance, calm it down, and recover from, stress or anxiety or a heavy workout or whatever you're doing.
Yeah, and again, there's different types of restorative breathing, but the simplest one that I think just is easy to apply anywhere. Like you could be sitting at your desk, you could be driving your car, to calm yourself, is to double the time of your exhalation to your inhalation. It's kind
Yeah.
of a simple recipe of, if I inhale for 4, I'm going to exhale for 8. And, just simply doing that, you'll feel like you just start to calm down. All of your physiological responses will calm down. So if you're in traffic and you're like, and you're stressed out, I will do it. I would like to inhale and then exhale long. And you probably, with you start to become aware of your breath, you'll probably notice that you do that when you are stressed, you probably will go to your breath and you kind of do that long exhalation, like,
Mm-hmm.
like we're angry and I just got to let it go. Right. So the exhalation is really what helps in restorative breath. The focus changes now to the long exhale, whether it's an auditory exhale, like a sigh or a ha, or just a really long exhale through your nose or your mouth. It slows down your heart rate. It stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. It's like it's this automatic response when we do a long exhalation.
So I want to bring up one other thing about breathing, which I play with a lot with clients, which is how are they breathing? Not necessarily in terms of inhale and exhale, but what's moving and what's not moving.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think of one client particularly every time I think about the breath, who was a complete, like, she could only breathe by using her scalings to lift her ribs up off of her lungs. She couldn't breathe deep. It was really like, and you think about any of you who out there have watched a horror movie, that moment of like, when something terrifying happens, or in Psycho when they pull the curtain aside or whatever. That is a sympathetic breath, right? That is anxiety in action.
Yeah.
And I had this woman who, this is how she breathed. Like every single breath, you'd see her neck tense up, you'd see her shoulders rise. And that was the only way she knew how to breathe. Oddly enough, she had a lot of neck issues, a lot of shoulder and neck tension. So not a surprise. And when we started to work with her, I worked some on just trying to get her to breathe, which she was not open to. So instead I played with like, okay, well, let's just use your mind to expand other parts of your rib cage. Like, put her hands around the bottom of her ribs and say, okay, so on the inhale, really push your hands out. So I give her something physical to do, which was changing her breath, but she could think about muscles, not breath, which for her seemed to help. Because she had very little mobility in her rib cage, in her lower rib cage. It was interesting. It was like, it just didn't move much. So in her case, kind of getting her to actually be able to move the ribs out in all different dimensions was a nice way to help to get the breath starting to move and starting to move down out of that like super tense place. It took a while, but it really changed things. And she was able to both mentally calm down and physically, relieve a lot of pain.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I think there are a lot of people that what I think of that is the mechanics of breathing. So their mechanics is off, right?
Exactly.
Somehow the mechanics of how their breathing is off. They're either breathing up into their upper chest or their lower chest. They're not expanding their ribs laterally or posteriorly. They've got stiffness in the intercostals, and so they're not elastic enough with the breath. And so there's like mechanics is something else to look at for sure on breath. And I just think that's a great observation. And how do we help people who aren't breathing well? The other thing that, as you were saying that, because I think that was a really good example, is some people don't know how to breathe through their nose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? They're not nose breathers. And my daughter's one of those. She doesn't breathe through her nose. She breathes through her mouth. And so learning to breathe through your nose or your mouth, depending on which one you tend to lean towards, is also like a practice. It's like, how do I just figure that out? So one of the things that it comes from the yoga is that alternate nasal breathing in yoga, where you close one nostril and you breathe in through one nostril and then exhale through the other, and then in through that one and out. And so when you close one nostril and breathe through one and then switch sides, you may even notice that breath is easier through one nostril than the other.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And some people feel like, oh, I'm getting short of breath. Like I'm not getting enough breath when they're breathing from one nostril to the other. And that's a whole, again, reorganization of, can I close my mouth and breathe through my nose only?
And I've actually had clients tell me that when they breathe through their nose, I'm not getting enough oxygen. You can see the anxiety, and it's not as though they have a cold. It's just they start breathing rapidly, trying to get more oxygen. And it's just an interesting sort of thing to watch. They're not comfortable with that. They're not comfortable with deep nasal breathing.
Yeah. And it's, again, it's a practice, because their mechanics are just different, right? They've gotten used to breathing a certain way.
Yeah.
And now to change it, it's like, that feels, and as you say, brings on anxiety. I'm like, I'm not getting enough breath. I'm not getting an air exchange that I need. I'm not going to make it. Right? It's like,
Well, I think Nora was bringing up the whole thing about COVID. I think the masks brought this up
Oh
in a
yeah,
lot of
that's
people,
true.
because I remember as a kid, I used to hate to sleep with the blankets over my head because I felt like it got hot, like I was breathing my own breath, and it was very
Yeah,
uncomfortable.
yeah,
And
yeah.
here I'm told, here's this thick, heavy thing you have to wear over your mouth all the time, from now on, anytime you're around other people. And it took a little while to realize how to do it, and that, okay, I'm not going to pass out from, carbon monoxide and all of that, because there was a little bit of fear there just
yeah.
from that memory. But I found myself, and I don't know if either of you felt this or anyone else listening felt this, but I found myself breathing shallow when I wore a mask, much more shallow than I did without it. And it just, I caught myself doing that. And I had to remind myself, no, breathe normally. But I found myself doing this small, shallower breathing. And I find that a lot of clients have had that residually follow them. And I see them just sitting, really shallow breaths.
Yeah. I am so glad you shared that, Brian, because I have to tell you, I had anxiety when I wore a mask, especially at the beginning. So you're making me feel better because I thought there was something wrong with me.
No, I had it.
No, but your whole idea of the breathing out into a mask, I felt like I was breathing in the carbon dioxide I
Right. Exactly. I felt like I was not
just
getting my.
exhaled, and I'm just taking it back in, and I want
Yeah.
fresh air. I want oxygen, right? And so, yeah, I do think that changed your breathing pattern. And now that you say that, I think I did the same thing. I started breathing more shallow, not taking deep breaths because I didn't feel like the air exchange was good air exchange.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and to bring that up a little bit more, there's there's all kinds of why it's good to breathe through your nose. I know like people using mouth tape these days and all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about breathing through your nose is it is actually in theory easier on your lungs and everything else, because when your air goes in, it gets moisturized through your nose, and it also kind of apparently it does all these like swirly turbinates things that like tornadoes in your nose. And so then when it gets into your lungs, it's a little bit moister, it's a little bit warmer, and it's a lot less stressful on the lungs. So one of the times when I use that is those clients who do have that kind of like, maybe they've had pneumonia, or their lungs are just, or they're asthmatic, they're sort of sensitive in their lungs. I'll really have them work on that breathing through the nose. And it's like, oh yeah, it's a little less stress on the lungs too. So that's another little piece of that.
Yeah, no, I think that there is a lot of research on that. Who's the author of the book Breathe? I
James
forgot.
Nestor.
James Nestor. He
James
really
Nestor,
talks about that.
great.
How it can actually change
Yes.
the structure of your jaw with breathing through
Yeah.
your nose. I thought that was so interesting. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, he talks a lot about that. It's a great book for those of you, since we're on the breathing topic. It's called Breath, I think, by James
Yeah.
Nestor, Nester, I think. Anyway, really, it goes into a lot of this and the research on it, and it's where a lot of these principles come from.
Yeah. And that's where, like, I think if you're interested in this topic, there's just so many different techniques. They all have benefits,
Yeah.
and just starting to understand what the benefit is, and then how can we apply it with the clients that we're seeing, so we can help them perform better, right? So perform better, that means better for life or for athletics or whatever it might be. Yeah.
Yeah, and with that in mind, like I really love the 3 categories you have and kind of the
Yeah.
examples of each of those, because there are, like, again, if you ever study martial arts or yoga or anything, there's a million different ways people talk about breathing, and some of it is really finding what works for your client, right? Like,
Exactly.
okay, this guy, like I think of one client who would always come in. She'd always come in after work. She was like a hot mess every time. And
Right.
I would just say, okay, let's just start with our restorative breath, because we have to get your energy level here, right?
Yeah.
And then another gal who she was literally narcoleptic. She would fall asleep with like her feet in the straps. Not a safe place to fall asleep, by the way.
No, exactly.
So
You need to be awake here. Yeah.
you need to be awake here, because you're going to fall off the table, and that's not going to be good for any of us. And so in her case, like I would have her come in and we would do like little percussive breathing, short breathing, or the really deep diaphragmatic breathing, things to kind of get her nervous system activated, because otherwise she would just like sink into this lethargic mess. So, a lot of times I'll use just a little bit of breath for somebody, even at the beginning of a session, to moderate where they are and help them get prepared for, whatever we're going to do with them.
Yeah.
And I find this is very, very interesting in that we, in all of our fields, love to have our toys and our tools, and we have the biggest toolbox, and we're always talking about, more things, more information, to fill our toolbox. Well, guess what? These are also tools, and the different types of breath can really help to either stimulate or to balance them or to bring them to a better state of mind where they can exercise. So knowing the different types of breathing and how to utilize each, I think is very important. I mean, I'm learning a lot from this and thinking, okay, for this client, I think I'm going to try this. And for this client, I think I'm going to try this. So I'm already starting to go through that in my head.
All right. Good. Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. And the more you explore it, the more you can start see applications in it. And then I also even bring it into the rhythm of the exercises. So a lot
Yes.
of my clients, they won't take the time to do breath work on their own,
Yeah,
right? Even though
absolutely.
they might know it's
No
important,
way.
right?
Yep.
Yeah.
But they won't do it. So
Yeah.
I'll even do something like the box breath with squats, for example. So I'll say,
Oh.
let's lower for 4 counts, hold at the bottom, and then exhale and stand up for 4 counts and hold at the top before we go
Nice.
again. And so we're
Nice.
actually practicing the box breath, but they don't know it.
They
They're
don't
just
realize
thinking
it.
that's the tempo or the rhythm of the exercise.
I love it.
Yes. And I do a lot of, just in Pilates, because Pilates is often like 1, 2, 1, 2, right? You push out, you come back, whatever. A
Yeah.
lot of exercises are. And sometimes what I'll really have people do is, okay, find your breath rhythm, because for some it's quicker, for some it's a little slower. And we'll play with like, okay, inhale here, exhale there, a very typical way to do that. And then I'll say, okay, speed up your breathing and speed up your movement with it, right? Or else I'll have them like say, do a quick exercise, but inhale for in, out, exhale for in, out. Right. So they're actually kind of like speeding up the exercise, but slowing down their breathing. And again, giving them something rhythmic to focus on for breathing. Again, whether they're doing it perfectly or not, I don't really care. It's just a matter of they're thinking about their breath or bringing it into their movement, and giving them a very simple way to do that is also a nice way to bring breath and movement together. So, whether you're trying to like, okay, in like a lot of times I'll do something like, let's say knee stretch. Right, hands are on the foot bar, feet are on the shoulder rest, you're pushing the carriage out and coming back in. We're going to do, let's say, a restorative breath. I can have you inhale and push out, slow in 3, 4, 5, push out in, and come in 2, 3, 4, 5. So just changing the rhythm with their breath. So just like you did with a squat is a great way to get the breathing and the movement together, and also change the exercise to give them some different stimulation on the exercise too.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I love it. It can apply in so many ways.
Yeah. Fabulous.
All right.
Well, thank you, Helen, so much. That was a great, I get it. I really feel like that was
I
a
learned
really,
so
really
much.
good introduction to breathing, and a nice way for any of our people out there who are listening to this, who, if they've been in this industry at all, have heard 100 different ways to breathe and are probably confused, like many of us have been. So I love the way you talked about the 3 different categories, different examples, and hopefully for you guys out there, this is just clarified, giving you a few new tools and ways to think about it. So that was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. And you know what I highly recommend people do is when you hear about a new breathing technique is try it and then see what kind of physiological response you get from it.
Exactly.
And then does it fit into, do you feel more energized, or do you feel balanced, or do you feel more restored from that breath? And then I just keep putting breath techniques as I learn them into these buckets and go, okay, I'm going to use this to help people calm down. I'm going to use this to get people excited.
Great. I love it.
Awesome.
I love it.
Awesome. Before we let you go, anything that you want to promote, where you're going to be, in the next couple of months or anything? Also your socials, where can people get in touch with you? Where can people follow you?
Yeah, so probably the best way to find out where I'm going to be, what workshops I'm offering, because I do present at conferences all over the globe. I'm also doing virtual events, is to follow me on Instagram. That's where I'm most active, is on Instagram. And my Instagram page is H Vanderburg. And if you follow me on Instagram, you will see if I'm going to be somewhere close to you in a live event, or whether I'm going to be doing virtual, and what I'm up to. So Instagram is probably the most frequent place on social that I am. I also have a website, helenvanderburg.com. So if I'm going to be doing any bigger projects, it'll show up on that website, but it'll also be promoted on my Instagram page.
Awesome. And we'll include those in the show notes too. So if you're writing things down or you're driving, don't write things down when you're driving. We'll make sure that that's on the show notes too.
Yeah. Okay. That's great.
Thank you so much, Helen. That was great.
Thank you.
And the clarity of you as an educator, I just have to say this, like I've worked with you many, many times in many different environments, and like your ability to just like organize the material is always superb. So thank you so much for that great introduction to breathing.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Nora and Brian, for having me on your show. And your show's fantastic. Everybody should be watching all of them because there's so much to learn. So, yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
You're going to take us out?
We're going to take you out. All right. So thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate all your focus on this. This was an incredible topic. We really appreciate your time. If you want, you can get in touch with us at movingconvos@gmail.com or through Instagram at movingconvos. And until next time, I'm Brian Ritchie. It's Nora St. John. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.